Hi, my name's Karen Fullerton-Chalmers and I'm the Prevention and Community Engagement Manager at Action Against Stalking. Today I'm joined by someone who has experienced stalking and who will be sharing their story with us today. Listeners' discretion is advised as there will be discussions of stalking. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So I'll just kick us off. So how did you know your stalker?
So he was my boyfriend. We had been together for about 16 months, but we'd actually known each other all the way since primary school, and had kind of we knew each other over that time and kind of kept tabs on each other via Facebook, but there was never. We went to separate schools and stuff, so we only really reconnected back just before lockdown, actually, and it was over a dating site.
Okay. So how long did the stalking itself last?
It started in the summer, and then it was about 6 months.
Okay. And how did it end?
It ended with he was charged. After quite a few arrests, they finally charged him in the autumn, and the following spring there was a sentence in, and he was sentenced to some time in prison. He's recently come out.
Okay, so he was sentenced, so it went through the criminal justice system, so you of course reported it to the police. How was your experience reporting it to the police?
So it's kind of a long story with a lot of little bits in it, but basically we broke up, and then it was about, and I had no contact, and it was about a week later that I noticed that some strange things were happening in terms of like my digital life. So for instance, my manager called me into his office first thing one Monday morning and wanted to know why there was a status on my LinkedIn saying I was looking for work, and that was a really embarrassing conversation because I doubted myself quite a lot, because I was looking for work, but I didn't want that to be publicised. So I kind of said, I'm really sorry, I must have done it by accident. It was a very weird atmosphere, and then over the next few days, that wasn't an isolated incident. That was something I kind of thought, oh, you're so dumb, and kind of, I won't do that again, put it to the back of my mind. And then over the next few days, lots of things happened at once digitally. So my Facebook was hacked, lots of friends were deleted, some posts were deleted, my name had been changed to something really random and seemingly nonsensical. My LinkedIn jobs had been applied for in my name with unrealistic salaries and just kind of garbage being written in all the different fields that pull across. And a new Facebook page had been created, but when mine had been hacked, this person had sent out a couple of strange messages, but then they'd also created a new Facebook with the same name and the same photo, and then they proceeded to add colleagues and former colleagues of mine, and I wasn't aware of this really happening, that they'd been sending messages to people, until I got a phone call at work from a former colleague and someone I was on friendly terms with, but hadn't spoken to in a while. And I answered the phone, and I could tell he was upset, and he said, "What's your problem?" And I said, I don't know what you mean. He says, "You've got a problem with me. Well, what is it? What have I done?" And I said, "I'm so sorry. I don't know what you mean. Did you mean to call me?" And he said, "Is this?" And he said my name, and I said yes. And he said, "Have you just been talking to me on Facebook?" And my heart sank. I just knew that this person had been kind of wreaking havoc. And I said no. And I sat down, and I immediately found myself go very hot. And and very upset. And I explained to him that something had been happening and I wasn't sure who it was. In the middle of all this, I'd actually, when it first started happening, I'd contacted Action Fraud. So this is stuff that's only happened over a matter of like a week or so. So I contacted Action Fraud and explained it to them, and they passed the case on to the local constabulary. And it took about a week for them to get in touch with me, but by that point, everything had kind of simmered down a little bit until this person had actually, I ran one of my dad's an account on Instagram for him, and this person had hacked into it and taken everything. And these posts, they took so long to write. It was quite kind of a specialist subject that was being written about. So on the day that happened, the constabulary phoned me, and I had a chat with this guy that, and he said to me, I don't think this is a random hacking. I think this is personal because it's so many accounts. One evening I was getting emails from Facebook, Tinder, Expedia, Wish, all of these different platforms saying that someone had tried to get into my Facebook and all that stuff. And the guy on the phone said to me, is there anyone who you think could be doing this to you? And initially, of course, my thoughts went to this ex-partner, but I didn't. But I kind of dismissed it pretty much instantly. No, he wouldn't do that. And then just before, and we got off the phone, he said he was going to look into it, and then he called me back and he says, look, with what you've told me about this kind of previous relationship, I wouldn't feel like I was doing the right thing by not undertaking a risk assessment. And he explained to me what that was, and they asked like a lot of questions in various degrees of like, being personal or not. Do you have a child? Has this person ever done this to you? Has this person ever done that to you? And all that. And so at that point I thought, oh well, okay, it seems to be that these things are linked, but I can't really say. So that's how that kind of started. And I had to change my phone number, which I've had for years, and I quite liked having the same phone number for all that time. It just made things so much easier. But I had to change it, and I did that, and then everything kind of stopped. I think the last straw was when someone tried to hack into my WhatsApp, and I was like, nope. So I knew they were still trying because my phone network, I got a message from them saying someone had tried to hack into my account with the phone number that I'd previously used. So I knew that was, but finally kind of changing that number put a stop to that, thankfully. And also, I wasn't maybe the smartest in terms of like being technologically savvy. I, like many people do, I had the same password or different versions of the same password, which is relevant because it, I know now that it was my former partner that was behind all this, and all he had to do was see me type it in once, and then he had all these variations. So I just want to make a note of that. But then the kind of second stage of it was that, so at the time of this breakup, I was going out with my friends a lot more, and like my work colleagues, and I was having, a pretty nice time outside of all this worry, and it was summer and it was beautiful outside, and I really wanted to kind of make the most of it. And I wasn't in the house all that much. And one night I come back to the house, and with a friend, I'm with two friends actually, and she says to me, can I have a smoke? Can I borrow one of your jackets? I said, of course, grab a jacket from anywhere. And I watched her take this jacket and smoke outside, and it had a massive cut in it, like a slash, and it was my favourite. And I thought to myself, you really need to be more careful with your stuff. You need to stop being so clumsy. Because the same night I noticed that my back door keys were missing, and then most alarmingly, which it could be a trigger for someone listening, it certainly would be for me, and I don't think I've quite processed it yet, and I can't prove it, is that my cat, one of my cats, my youngest, she came to greet me, was standing on the counter, and she had her tail, it looked like it had been cut, and I could see blood, and Some of her fur was missing, and I put it down to, I couldn't comprehend someone doing that, and I put it down to her maybe having gotten it trapped somehow. But the more I know now, and looking back on it, I don't think that's a coincidence at all. And over the next kind of week or so, I got the back door locks changed, but I still noticed over those weeks that there was some things missing, like my passport, a little bit of cash, a top that I'd been looking for that he had actually given to me. Couldn't find that anywhere. My monitors in my spare room, I didn't use them that often, and they kind of faced the window, and I noticed one evening that one of them had been smashed. It might have been both of them, actually. And my mum was over, and I went into my wardrobe, and there was I looked at like a section of some of my clothes had been ripped, like slashed, and there was no way that wasn't deliberate. And my mum was saying, we've got to call the police. And so that was kind of the second part of it, the second risk assessment that was taken. Someone came over, but there was very little that they could do, because at that point I didn't have a Ring doorbell or anything like that. I didn't have any evidence that this person had done this. Of course, their fingerprints would be all over my house, but it was just something there that it did two things. One, it added another kind of layer of credibility and another channel of potential stalking to the case, but it also gave me kind of like a big kick up the backside in terms of security. And I know not everyone's in a position to be able to do this, but my parents helped me purchase security cameras, for the front and the back of the house. It kind of, that was when it kind of reached a point where, okay, this is real. And I think it was the day after I'd had my statement taken that a neighbour came over the next day about 11 o'clock. I'd been out the night before to a barbecue, gotten in quite early, was asleep, nursing a very well-deserved hangover. And a neighbour came over and he said, I know that you told us to keep an eye out for this guy in his car because he shouldn't really be around here. And I live in quite a small village on a very small street. And he said, I just want you to know that he parked around the corner earlier. He tried to access the front of the property, clocked the camera, then tried to access the back, at which point my neighbour had kind of yelled at him, you shouldn't be here. The guy took off, almost taking out the guy's wife in his car, who was also trying to get out of the same street. And so that was when he was properly arrested for the first time. After that, it was a case of there were lots of different things, kind of there's like a montage of where he pulls up behind me in the car on my way to work. Even when I'm using, I got to hire a pool car for a week from my work, and even when I was using that, he'd pop up behind me, and I thought, how the hell do you know? And it was like he was sending me messages of saying, there's nothing that you can do to stop me doing this. I know that you're in a different car, and I know that you know that you can do nothing about this. So there was that side of it, and there was him hanging around my kind of go-to places I frequented in my village, in a village where he didn't have any family or friends or ties apart from me. So that prevented me from going anywhere, and especially going anywhere alone, and forget going out after dark. I started to have friends stay overnight with me. Every now and then I'd stay over at my parents' house. I always kind of felt like I was in a bit of a fishbowl. And then a couple months later, I'd had to go into a town near where I live. I parked in a car park, and I thought I was pretty vigilant, in keeping my eyes peeled and everything like that. And I go into this shop. I'm in this shop for 20 minutes or so, and I come out and I sit in my car. I'm sorting out my music and all those things that primarily women do when they get in their car, instead of locking it straight away. And a man approached the side of the vehicle, and he told me to wind down my window. And initially I thought, oh, maybe I've parked in a disabled space and someone's going to yell at me. And I really was kind of feeling a bit too beaten down to be like yelled at or anything like that. And so I was initially a little bit defensive. And he said, I just want you to know, I've just seen this guy come up to your car. In the 20 minutes I'd been parked there and keyed it. And he said he keyed it so hard I could hear it across the car park. And so that was the second time. The third time the police were called, and but the guy kept coming back to the scene, which I couldn't really understand. There was this recklessness about him that was scarier than kind of anything. And it was during that time that in front of people he actually assaulted me in that car park. And so yeah, that was the second arrest. And then the next day, it was pretty disappointing. He was let go as I predicted. But when the officer phoned to say he'd been let go, they actually said he was let go about an hour ago. So I was out of the house at that time, and it gave me no time to prepare for what was going to happen there. And he comes back out, and he's straight away back in the local area. And it was at that point I thought, this is unfair. Like, nothing is happening here. If something's going to happen here, I've got to take more action myself. And I'm not really a taking action kind of person. And so I went to all the neighbours again. I went to local pubs. I went to the pub in the next village across from me, where he was showing up a lot because I had some family ties there. And a lot of people kind of knew there was stuff going on anyway, especially like I'd come to that pub a couple of times, like very, very upset. And so when I explained that, look, I know that people are allowed to come in and do what they want, and you're allowed to have whoever you want in your pub and your business, but this is what's happening, and I would at least appreciate if even if this can't be stopped, if you could just please give me a heads up anytime he comes in, so I can not be there, because I didn't want that confrontation or that fear. And so that was something that was actually really helpful in hindsight, because they were able to let me know when he was there, and there were other members of the community that had seen what was happening. Again, a very small village, so that was something that it wasn't just my kind of witness testimony. It was other people's, and so that kind of led to, along with some breakthroughs in the cyber stalking case, that kind of led to his third and final arrest. And I was informed, the next day after that he would be charged with those crimes.
Okay, sorry, I know we can't see each other, but I'm like shaking my head in disbelief, because every time I hear these stories, just the lengths that people go to stalk people just never ceases to amaze. You mentioned there about the different methods that were used. So there was digital there with sort of hacking, but also physical, such as following you, which I think really shows to other people listening to this the range of methods that people can take to target someone. One thing that really stood out to me there that you said was you felt like you were in a bit of a fishbowl. So I suppose, what were the impacts of the stalking on you?
So I had to write about this in my impact statement, and the impacts kind of went along the full spectrum in terms of physical, financial, social, and emotional. So physically, I lost weight, my periods were all over the place. I had the most upset tummy, which is obviously, that fight or flight response kicking in. Financially, I was very fortunate enough to get help from parents in terms of cameras, but also having a dash cam fitted to the car, extra security on the windows, with downstairs windows and doors. It's a bit like Fort Knox, actually. Emotionally, I was very anxious. Sleeping was difficult. I had to ask the doctor if they. I at the time was on sertraline for pretty low level general anxiety, well, health anxiety actually. But I asked them to up that, which they did for that time. And then socially was kind of the area that surprised me the most in a good way, in a bad way. The good way in that, like I said, the people who were around me, family and friends and kind of local community members were fabulous. I had people stay over with me. I did have a lot of support in that respect, and I didn't believe in being too private about it, because what occurs to me is whenever I watch, in the past when I've watched things about stalking, about that poor Alice Ruggles, or when I've read about Molly McCarran or Gracie Spinks, I always, want to. At the time I thought, I'd scream, I'd be shouting to everyone who I could, who was around me, please help me, like my life is in physical danger. And what I learned on the negative side is that people don't always see it that way. And for me, that was a case, particularly with the people I work with. And I faced quite a lot of kind of injustice and judgment during that period from people, unfortunately, in most cases, it was women who didn't understand and didn't really want to understand. So a colleague of mine who would kind of see the effects of this on a day-to-day basis, because I'd be showing up at work and being like, he followed me again today, or police would show up at work and take statements. So people, this person could see the impact it had on me, and she said to me on a few occasions, and I didn't stick up for myself, and she just said, you should take it as a compliment, because there's obviously something really special about you. And it wasn't, this guy did not want to rekindle the relationship. And if he did, that would have been absolutely the wrong way of going about it anyway. He wanted revenge. He wanted to hurt me. And it was very intent on trying to destroy me in every way that he could. And then another thing that, I still lose sleep over now because it bugs me so much, is that, I was only allowed to have a pool car from work for a week, for a place I'd been at for over 4 years. And the reason for that was because the person who controlled that did not like me at all. And she actually told another one of my colleagues that I should be a better judge in character. And because she had kind of jurisdiction over who got to use those cars, I got it for a week, and I was instructed to bring it back. It had a full tank of petrol in it, not that matters, but still. And then it sat in the car park for 3 weeks, but she framed it like someone else needed it. So when I was attacked and my car was keyed, that was when I had to give it back, and I'd had to kind of drive my own car around, which he'd seen, because he'd seen it every day for 16 months. So that's something that definitely still bothers me now. My manager saying things like, he didn't want to know, and there's no other kind of way to say it. And I remember him saying to me once, I'm not going to ask you about this unless you want to talk about it. So that he wouldn't like check in or anything like that. It was uncomfortable for him. So they were the main impacts. And like I said, I've got a lot of support around me, and so a lot of it doesn't haunt me too much. But the way that people were and how people treated me and glamorizing it or seeing it, that was something that was my fault, even though all I wanted was to be left alone. And I didn't want it to come to any of this. I didn't want to get the police involved. I didn't want to be asked 20 invasive questions every time I had to. That's not on them, they were doing their jobs, but that's what it came to. And my life was kind of just deconstructed, and I was having to tell people, obviously in authority, very personal things. And if it was my choice, no, it absolutely wouldn't have come to that. It wouldn't have been that severe at all. He would have just left me alone, and I like that I couldn't get across to people, and I was so beaten down at that point that I didn't see the point. What's the point in trying,
Yeah, and I think that's important what you're saying about essentially blaming the victim. So victim blaming is very real. as we know, and people do glamorize it or say things such as you should take that as a compliment, because it is often romanticized in a lot of ways, stalking, as someone trying to court you in a way, and like you say, your stalker wanted revenge. He didn't want that, but that does happen all too often, which is terrible. But it's good to hear that you had a lot of support from your friends and family. That is something that we do hear a lot, that friends and family really do help. So it's nice to hear that. One thing I was going to ask you is, what are the key things you want people listening to take away from your story? So a big thing I've taken away from it so far is the whole thing about taking action. You were saying you took action by going to local places, going to the pub, going to the community, and they really banded together to sort of help. But is there anything else that you want people to take away?
Yes, there's a few things that, like what you've just said, make everyone at least feel comfortable around you, aware of what's happening, neighbours, friends, places you frequent, work. There's also something that I got some advice from a legal person at one point, when I was kind of worried that it would end up going to court with a jury, and she said to me, and I totally agree with this, don't worry about being a nuisance to the police. By the time this guy was finally charged, I'd called them over 10 times, with various kind of degrees of urgency and concern. And then think that leads on to collect evidence and keeping a log of behaviour. So for me, I was collecting emails that the guy had sent immediately after the breakup, and emails he'd sent to me at my work address, emails sent to me from colleagues in like our sales department where his call had gone through to, saying, can you give this guy a call? He doesn't say what he wants, but he said it's urgent. There was quite a big paper trail, and even when I was hacked, there was sometimes when I was hacked on my email, there were details about the IP address and like the email address it had changed to and the telephone number it had changed to. So all of that, I took a screenshot of that. I tried to keep, once the relationship ended, I did delete all messages, because that's just kind of a thing that I do personally. I think when something's over, I don't want to be going back and dwelling on it and second guessing myself. So unfortunately, there were messages that I didn't have that would have given context, but after that, certainly via email and stuff, and just the persistence of it and how it started very nice and please and stuff like that, and every single time, and I'd highlighted where I'd tried to shut it down and said, please stop, making it clear this is very unwanted. But then also keeping a bit of a chronological log of behaviour if you can, and trying to remember, well, who was I with that time when I saw him at the bus stop near my house, and what happened that day, and really trying to, and it just kind of helps you put things into perspective, because when it goes on for a long time, and there are certainly cases where it goes on for longer than it did for me, you're going to be, by that time, you're going to be so confused, your head is going to be frazzled. So keep a log, and if and only if you can afford it, and I know that not everyone can, and especially with the cost of living these days, purchasing some sort of security like one of those Ring doorbells, or a small indoor motion sensor camera that links to your phone. At one point, I was actually driving around with two phones in phone holders at the back and the front of the car. One was my work phone, one was my personal phone, which acted as dash cams. That's kind of like the level of desperation. And I had this 25-minute journey where I had to keep alternating my route again, which he knew. I'm naturally a creature of habit, and then other than that, just, I guess, advice for family and friends of people being stalked is again just to believe them, and believe the impact, and just be on their side, because they need it, because it's intensely personal, and that's why it's so scary. This person is doing what they can to hurt you or sabotage you, or whatever the circumstances are. It's all aimed at this one person. So absolutely, you should support them. And I think that's it, really.
No, that was really useful, especially the tips that you were given. And then for friends and family, again, about listening, how important that is, believing. And also something you mentioned earlier about passwords, making sure they're protected, making sure they're unique, and I suppose making sure you don't share them with people, and if you do, to change them, which is also really important that you brought up earlier. Is there anything else you want to add before we do our wee wrap up?
No, I don't think so. Thank you again very much. It's as useful as I hope it is to other people. It's also been quite useful to me to speak about someone who understands it. Apart from the police, I've not, I'm quite thankful to not have anyone, in my life who understands it in as great a detail as you or as I do from experience. So, thank you very much for that.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I really do appreciate it, and we know that it will help people out there, because the biggest thing is when people share their story, it really does create awareness about what's going on. You can show all the facts and figures in the world, but until you hear it from someone who's actually been through it, it's very, very different perspective. So I really do thank you for taking the time. If you or someone you know has been affected by stalking, you can contact Action Against Stalking on their helpline 0800 820 2427, or you can email support@actionagainststalking.org. You can also visit the website www.actionagainststalking.org, and you can follow us across social media. Thank you.